check my audio just to make sure everything be slick. Let's see. Boom. Hold up. 10 seconds ish. YouTube's a little slow. Once I get my own assistant, I'll be able to check audio levels through them. Check my dope. All right, so let's do this. Welcome. This is welcome back to the stream. We're doing week 3 for color keys, right? This is actually where the color part comes in, right? You know, we've been doing color keys, but we've been doing value this whole time, right? But you know, I think it really goes to show like how important, you know, values really is for your image, right? It holds together the entire image. Color is really nice and color looks really good. But if your values don't make sense, or the value structure doesn't make sense, usually you don't have an image at that point. So a lot of focus on that, but right now we're going to jump into color, right? This week, it's going to be like a quick explanation as to like what I'm thinking about, and what you should be thinking about when you do it, right? But really, realistically speaking, we're going to pick one of these and then just kind of start taking it to color. So the actual lesson part is actually not as long as you might think. There's just some things that you want to keep in mind, right? So starting off with what we had last week. Oh, this isn't what we had last week. I did this over the week, right? But all I did was just kind of take my shapes, refine it just a little bit further, right? I just, you know, most of it, like the first at least 5. Yeah, other than the one that we worked on last week, right? Those are all pretty close. I adjusted some shapes. I fixed some things, but overall, all I really did was clean up some of the shapes in the foreground. And this is actually something that I want to kind of, you know, I guess break down to people, where whenever we're doing this, you know, understanding that you don't need to really be that clean when it comes to your images, especially in a thumbnail phase like this. All you really have to do is give us just enough information for everyone to kind of see what's happening, right? Give me one second. Let me fix something real quick. Where's it at? There it is. Cool. So really what we're looking at here is, you know, we have our images, right? And if I overlay one of them here, I'll even show you. Here's week 2 stuff. No, week 1. Should I have? Yeah, we'll just do that. Kind of show you like how, I don't want to say little, but how much we really didn't do, right? So I'm going to take that. I'm going to copy this. All right. So if I overlay this right here, right? All I did was just add, like, I just adjusted a little bit of values. I fixed like some of that light pattern on the ground, and then added a high fidelity like leaf shape. You know what I mean? It's really not that much, right? Because I think something that happens a lot, especially like in newer artists and students and stuff, is that whenever we have our images, our compositions, right, or just, you know, our roughs, so to speak, there's this idea that's like, oh, I gotta like clean up everything, and you know, you're sitting there for hours, even days sometimes, cleaning up a rough. But in reality, you know, we're just looking for cleaner silhouettes. So all I did, you know, I just have this, I have this tree shape, or it's just like leaves, looks like that, right? And I just like stamped it around, you know what I mean? And I just kind of did that. And the cool part about this is whenever you see this, all you're seeing is those shapes. You can, you know, like the tree trunks are exactly the same. There's some more extra rocks, but they're like half circles, right? There's really, I just lassoed those out real quick. And then there we go. But getting some high fidelity things in the foreground, right, really kind of holds the image together, right? And I did that for all of them, where it's like, oh yeah, because these trees, like, you know, is roughly kind of what I wanted it to be. But these in the back, or these other images, like, you know, all I got to do is just add some leaves, add some things, just so it's like, oh, okay, I get what that is, right? And then, you know, I think this one, and I think this one, I kind of added a couple extra things because it wasn't quite there yet. But as a whole, right, pretty good, right? Not really that far away, and added some grass just to kind of make you understand what you're seeing. Because the second that you kind of bridge that gap between like a loose painting and like a clean silhouette, the images actually do, the graphic shape does a lot of that heavy lifting. if you've taken like let's say my world building 2 class, right? You'll kind of know like how far a graphic shape can really go, right? You can do like 70% paintings with like graphic shapes and gradients, right? You don't even need lighting. You don't really need, or I guess like the like lighting shapes, like light side, shadow side, and stuff like that. You know, there's always mood and lighting, but you don't need like physical shapes as much, and it's not, and the textures inside don't do as much as you think, right? So just kind of want to explain that. It's actually pretty quick in terms of how long, right? I kind of spent on each one, maybe like 30 minutes per, right? Just kind of getting into that next level, because we are going to be, you know, we have 2 more phases to this. We have the color phase, and then we have the kind of, I don't want to say rendering, but quote unquote rendering phase. So we don't want to spend too much time laboring over things that we're going to replace anyway, right? You'll kind of understand what that means in the next week that we kind of do color keys. But for now, just understand that, you know, these pieces that I put in there, they're either placeholders or just, you know, just kind of base shapes that we're going to adjust later if we need to. Like a lot of the trees in the back, those are going to stay exactly the same. It's really, we're going to fix whatever's in the foreground, and then whatever the focal point is, right? We'll kind of render out that character just a little bit better. And then we'll kind of add some things just to make this feel, you know, full, right? So looking at this, I did a couple things. That lighting scenario that we saw last week, right? Where I just kind of like value adjusted some things, and I just kind of like, I flattened the whole thing and just kind of like made it brighter, darker, just kind of like levels it out. I applied that to the images themselves, right? And I want to show you what I was thinking about. So when we're looking at our first image here, right, we have a pretty bright image overall. Like it's, you know, when you squint down, it's a very, like, you know, in accordance to everything here, it's a pretty bright image. We're still in the forest and we're still kind of exposed for shadow, but at the end of the day, right, it's a very bright image. And as we go deeper into the story, right, we start losing that light shape. So now this whole thing was like, you know, I would say what, 70% lighting or 70% light, right? And then now we're getting into like, you know, 25% or maybe even less. And then here you get like maybe 10% right there. It's kind of like, right, it's right at the back. It's not too late to turn back, right? But that light represents safety in this scenario, right? Or I guess the comfort of like, you know, home or something familiar, right? And then she's going into this darker kind of area. She even changed composition directions as she kind of, you know, is going through this this kind of area to kind of show that negative approach. Also, even going like downwards, right? Like she's kind of going down some, you know, quote unquote stairs or steps, down levels, right? Trying to represent the situation that's going on. It's not a good one, right? And then giving her this target to kind of go to, and then she kind of interacts with the wolf character, in which case it's a fox in this case, right? But she's going to interact with him in some sort of way. And then she comes across the thing that pushed her off course to begin with, right? The flowers that she wants to go pick for grandma. That's what she's doing. So she, you know, we have this kind of like almost darkest scene here, right? Where progressively we're going from light, you know, medium light, dark, darker. And then now we're like, we flash to light again, right? Because now we have this, maybe, I was thinking like dappled light, where there's a light kind of coming from the forest and it's going to hit the top of these flowers and they're gonna, you know, it's gonna kind of illuminate. It's gonna feel kind of magical. But the whole point is, this is like a, this is like that briefcase moment in a lot of movies where they're kind of like, it's this thing that they've been after, and it's kind of glowing. And there's this idea of, you know, I guess, desire. Sure, like they want this thing, and then she wakes up and she's like, oh shit, you know, I'm in this area that is, you know, super dark, right? She's kind of like, oh shit. Now the realization is there where she's in danger and she needs to kind of get out, and she needs to go to the light again, right? She needs to kind of go up and out, right? So that's the kind of setup that we have going on, right? Just understand that the main idea behind all of this is that images need to work together, right? Especially in a sequence like this, there needs to be, you know, I guess an idea of values kind of working together, because anything can be lighter or darker, you know, anything can be,
Looks like a lecture.
Nope. Hey, Julia, your mic's going off. Same with you, Rickety Rick. Your mic's going off. All right. So, but yeah, the whole idea is, you know, whenever you look at all 6 of these images, you know, you can have any lighting scenario that you want when it comes to your images, right? But what you want to do is make sure that you set your lighting in a way that works with the others, and it kind of guides us through the story. You know, you kind of have peaks and troughs, right? You have like ups and downs, and the values kind of represent that. So as you're going through the story, you know, you can kind of have those transitions, right? So that's kind of how I would approach that. But as we know, we're in color key mode, right? So this is where the colors come in. In reality, I really wouldn't do a black and white like this unless I was asked. I would do this in conjunction with my color to make sure that, you know, they're like, it's all kind of working together. Because sometimes, you know, you can't get certain things as bright or as dark as you kind of want in color, right? Because, you know, red will never get to a white, right? Because in reality, or like a 90% value, because red is, you know, like a 50% gray at the full brightest, right? Because if I do this, like I'm on full red right now, right? And I have that tone. If you grayscale this, right, that's like a 50% gray or something like that. So your values can't always be represented the same way. But, you know, the idea is here, right? And then now, this is when we get into color. So I did a couple things. The first thing was I rearranged this, kind of look at this in a sequence in terms of like a line, right? So these are the exact frames that we just took, and you know, pretty self-explanatory as to how I laid that out, right? Just in sequence. And then after that, I started thinking about what does color mean for this story. In this case, she's in a forest, and I guess her like Little Red Riding Hood, her color is red. It's, you know, thematically. In the story, there's a significance to red, right? So I kind of played with that idea. What's the opposite of red, right? Green. And so the idea is it's this little girl, it's this little red dot, right? And she's in a sea of green, essentially, because basically what I'm trying to show is she's not home. She's not somewhere that is very comfortable for her. So whenever I'm picking the colors that I want for the scenes, you know, I'm trying to pick colors that are actively working against her, right? And so this is kind of where, like, you know, obviously we're in a forest too, but you can kind of change forest colors depending on seasons and things like that. But I wanted to kind of go for that green because it really contrasts with her red. This is someone that doesn't belong here, right? Because if she was wearing green and she's in a forest of green, right? You know, kind of like if you think about like The Hobbit, right? Or Lord of the Rings, where, you know, the Hobbit colors are very brown, natural forest greens and stuff. And then they live in these brown, natural forest green environments, right? You know, the hills, the houses, the wood and stuff like that, right? And so they feel like they're connected, right? So in this case, I'm trying to make it feel like she's not connected, right? And so that's why that color is the way it is. And then, you know, just as a little extra bonus, I kind of incorporated a shape language to her, which is, in my case, I was thinking like an oval or a circle, just a round shape in general. And then thinking the fox, in this case, is like blue triangle, right? Danger, right? Trying to create a shape that is, you know, just a little bit more dangerous, right? Obviously, this is a very simplistic way to show that. But the whole point is we're creating a dynamic between one shape versus the other, one color versus the other, right? And you know, it's just something where we're just trying to create ideas here, right? And so now we have the reason our shape is the way it is, the size of the shape, right? You know, the red being in a sea of green, essentially, right? And then now you can kind of see the value progression between like super light, warmer, right? Warm greens, right? Green yellows, right? And then cool, cold, like blue greens, like teals, right? And so now, because she's red, right? Her color palette is red. What I'm trying to do is create a color palette that feels more inviting. Yes, you know, it's still green in the sense that it's an opposite color and she doesn't belong there, which she doesn't, right? She lives in a house in a town probably, but she's going through this, you know, quote unquote dangerous place, right? But it's safer in some areas than others. So I'm just shifting the colors towards a warmer idea, right? It's not red and it's not yellow, but it is closer to there. We're kind of going from, you know, like instead of like, if you actually look at this color palette here, right? We have, you know, if she's over here, and we're looking at like the deep of the forest, probably in this kind of greenish cyanish area, we're kind of like over here towards like yellow green, right? We're not like fully over there. It's still green. It's still a forest. There's still danger that is kind of presented here, right? But at the end of the day, we understand that the color is, I guess, closer relation to her, which, you know, might signify a safer environment, right? And as we go further and further away from, you know, the safety net of the road, right, we're going more green, darker, and then cooler as the kind of colors kind of progress on, right? So that's the kind of base idea that I'm kind of thinking about. Just little story thematic elements that can really make this, you know, color palette make sense. Because when you look at this in a movie, you might not know why, but you feel the color transitions. You're not paying attention fully, but you do understand that at the end of the day, the colors mean something and they say something about the characters, right? So after that, I just went to Shot Deck. I had some of these. These are actually some references, specifically these four are references that I already had from the previous week, right? It was from when I was looking at just like kind of references on forests and stuff like that. Because it's such a variety, I was already kind of processing this and thinking about it. But you know, we have that kind of nice, strong light kind of coming in, right? It's kind of, we're exposed for shadow, right? We have these warmish yellow, sunsetty kind of colors, right? Closer to the reds that we have. As we're moving away, we're going more towards greens, and then we're going bluer and bluer and bluer, right? And then here I have this extra kind of color here that happens where, you know, she's here for the flowers. She's here for this thing. And that's, you know, the whole, hopefully that thing kind of represents what she's, you know, trying to get. So maybe they're kind of orangish or whatever, right? And it creates the sense of like, oh, these and her kind of belong together, right? There's a relationship there, and we kind of want to represent that, right? But also showing that it's blocking a lot of her view. She's kind of blinded by these things, and then boom, we're in danger, right? So little things like that, right? It's not really about like just adding color to a scene, right? Because, you know, when we do normal paintings, right, like just one-off paintings, or, you know, just our regular designs, we don't usually have to think about these story points. Same reason why in the value stage, you know, when you do like variations and stuff, it's not, you know, it's not really important that the scenes kind of work together like that. But when you're doing a color key sequence like this, these are more important to understand how they transition to each other and what's the progression of that overall moment. What's, you know, a peak moment, what's a, you know, kind of a filler moment. And then, you know, how do we transition from one to the next, and how is the story going from one idea to the other, right? And that's kind of where we want to represent that, not only through just adding color, right? If like, oh, forest green, but also showing the value, right? And then the color and hue and all of that shifting to help kind of, you know, accommodate for that idea, right? So hopefully that makes sense for everybody. You know, if you have any questions, you definitely just ask it in the chat, whether it's in YouTube or Discord. But you know, it's a lot of like assigning meaning to where there isn't any, right? Whenever you're creating these stories, you know, if you've ever created an image where you're just kind of like, oh, just kind of putting stuff on a page, right? It usually ends up being very bland, right? It's just kind of like, that's whatever, you know, there's not really much thought that kind of goes into it. But if you start kind of creating images that actually mean something and they link up somehow, they create a much better, you know, I guess unit, right? The team together is bigger than the individual, you know, players themselves, right? And so that's kind of what's happening here. There's all of these images are part of a bigger puzzle, and when they're all together, everything makes sense, and it looks good because it has reason, right? Maybe it's not, you know, maybe we can pick other compositions, maybe we can pick other color palettes, but at the end of the day, all you have to do is have a reason for a color to be a certain way, assign meaning to certain things, and kind of build off that, and you'll have something, hopefully, that makes sense, right? So cool. Let's see. I guess it's time to get into this. What should I do? I need to pick one of these, right? I need to kind of get one of these in a, I guess into the range that I'm thinking. So if there's anybody that's feeling a particular way about any of them, just let me know. Let's see. Let me get set up while we're doing this. I need. Boom. Where's my. Boom. Actually, hold up. No, I need to do this. You guys feeling anything? Anybody like, dude, that darker one looks sick, or that lighter one looks.
As far
cool.
as like which one to actually like get going on.
Yeah. Do you have any suggestions? Everyone else is shy.
I think that wolf one would be awesome. Like where she sees the wolf.
Nice.
I was looking at that one too.
All right, let's do that then. Boom. It's this one right here. Let's see. Let me copy that. Go to week 3. Let's go. All right. So I got the wolf one, right? This is hopefully this is going to be pretty simple, right? But this is kind of going into the more technical side, right? So what we just explained there was the general overview of what you really should be understanding about color, you know, scripting, right? Just, you know, applying color. And generally speaking, maybe not the top row so much. These are like kind of, this top row is kind of more of an explanation from my end as to like what I'm doing. But in a normal setting, right, in a work setting, I would get boards that look just like this, right? And maybe there might be, you know, a couple different references to kind of, you know, they'll be like, oh yeah, like this forest, but like with this thing as well. You know what I mean? It'll kind of be a little bit more in detail, but generally speaking, this is actually it. You know, I got this type of board actually without the values. I would have like just a sketch from the storyboard artist, right? Just like quick thumbnails and stuff like that. But you know, all you got to do is it's usually spelled out for you. It's this sketch plus this color palette, and then you know your painting, and hopefully you know that turns out to be a good enough thing, right? But as far as like when you're getting assignments like this, you do have to understand what all this means, because sometimes you know there's adjustments that we have to make, right? For example, these aren't going 100% going to 100% translate into these paintings very easily. You know, I got as close as I could, right? And I mean, you can definitely see how they would work out, right? But sometimes it just doesn't go as planned, or the reference that you got wasn't as good as, you know, you could have wanted, right? So the point is, you have to understand what they're even doing, because let's say like, oh, I can't get it that bright. Well, let me get it a little bit brighter. It's like, well, no, well, we're going darker. So you should actually go darker, right? You know, there's decisions that you can go right or left. I can go more blue. I can go more yellow. I can go brighter. I can go darker. And if you know what's next in line or where we're trying to lead to, right? Ultimately, this one right here, it's, you know, if you can do that, then any decisions that you make that you kind of like make on the fly, right? You have to like decision make without, you know, bothering your lead all the time. You can do it in relation to the place that we're going, right? Especially like as artists, you know, you don't ever want to be an artist that just does what they're told, right? You don't want to be somebody that just says like, oh yeah, cool, you know, I'll add blue, and then you just kind of add it mindlessly, right? But the whole point is you need to think about like, hey, what are they trying to tell me, right? What do they want from this, and where are they trying to go? Because sometimes, right, the thing that they said doesn't quite work out, right? And we've had this before where, you know, it's like, oh, that doesn't work. Yeah. But now your job as an artist to be like, oh, hey, I tried the thing that you said, and here it is. Here's that comp, or here's that painting. I didn't really think it worked out that well. Here's my version. Here's what I think we should go because of A, B, and C reason, right? You're creating a solution because you're the one actually doing it. Sometimes the vision doesn't really quite work out. Some things, you know, didn't quite connect or whatever. But you as the artist, if you know what the destination is, right? If you know what everyone's trying to do, then you can help craft that vision and make things a lot faster, right? That's how we become actually good artists, right? Because people that can do the work, you're average, right? You're somebody that can, you know, if I tell you to do something and you do it, you're like kind of mid-level, right? Where, you know, generally speaking, you can paint, you can draw, but you're not really thinking, right? But it's not till you get, you know, to those senior levels or even above that, where when they hand you something that's kind of messed up and they don't even quite know what to fix, what to do with it, but they know where they need to go, right? Like, I don't know, you know, exactly what this is supposed to look like, but I know it needs to fit for this thing. and then you can kind of, you know, process that and kind of give them a result that actually works, right? So that's the long explanation. But at this point, we're just gonna get into painting, right? I'm gonna grab the colors from this, and then we'll just start kind of going, right? So cool. To read some comments real quick. Randy said finally was able to catch this live. Dude, Randy, thanks for showing up, man. Thanks for coming live. Yes, and then Vishal asks, how do you separate value groups to get quicker selection of them? So I guess what you're asking is, in this painting, right? I'm assuming it's the different like pieces. Like for example, the how do you separate like, or how do you, I guess, select out from the painting and stuff like that, right? I'm assuming that's what you're asking. If not, clarify in the comments. Just type it again, or type what you mean. But the way I work, right, is actually very linear, right? I'm planning for the next step for every painting that I do. Like the reason I work the way I do, right? For example, if I look at this, you see how I added the darkness just through a color or through a layer adjustment. So I can turn that off and actually work in a normal capacity now. I don't have to worry about too many gradients, right? Or seeing like, oh, I need leaves and I need a tree trunk, right? I keep that all separate. And you can probably merge these two pieces together and you'd probably be fine. But I keep them separate because, you know, once I need to add a color, right? Let's just add a random color in there, right? I can just clipping mask into it and I get a perfect selection of exactly what I have, right? Because for those of you that like work in a very like loose one layer painting type of process, right? You run into this issue a lot where now you have this grayscale painting, but you have to now like, you know, get like some leaf selections, or you have to like do certain things. And if you're not really clean about it, it's just a nightmare. Like oftentimes you have to like just redo the entire painting, which, you know, I'm not about that life. I'd rather work in a weird way than have to redo work. You know what I'm saying? So the way I like to go about it, the reason why I work the way I do is because of this, right? It's like, okay, sweet. Now, let's say this wasn't even a color key and this was like a final painting like that I needed to do, like an illustration or something, right? I would then just start clipping photos into this, clipping, you know, painted assets into this, like whatever I painted from my asset sheet, or, you know, whatever it is, but I have my clean layers and everything works really well together. I don't need to restart anything. And there's really not that many layers, right? There's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, about 23-ish layers or something like that, right? And so, you know, when you're actually looking at this, yeah, it's not that bad. You know, I know where my ground planes are. I know where my floor planes are. And that's why we did that, you know, disgusting sketch in the beginning, right? All I needed was placement, right? All I need to know is that there's a dude up there and there's this little girl standing there, right? Or a dude, fox, right? And so the reason we go so loose is because now I know the placement. I don't really need to worry too much about like the smaller stuff. And I try not to be too like brush strokey about it. Because for one, it's a waste of time. And then two, like if you can't tell what's happening here, right? If you're like, oh, I need some illustration juice for this painting to work, it probably doesn't work, right? I don't think I've ever gotten a complaint on like this kind of quality, right? Giving people like layers like, because they know I'm gonna make it look cool, right? So, but yeah, that's the idea. I don't have to worry about separating my value groups because they're already separate. So, cool. Let's see. Let's get into this. Boom. Where's my, which one was it? It was the 007 one. Dope. Sick. All right. So this is where I don't want to say shenanigans, but you know, this is where the fun begins, right? So if you think that we have to be purists and like, oh, I have to like match that, you don't. You really don't, right? This is what we're gonna do. We're gonna take this. I'm gonna move this to the side, right? And you know, we're gonna eyedropper the hell out of this thing, right? Because no one owns color. They don't own hue, right? I need to match the color, and I don't want to sit there and be like, all right, you know, like I have this tree here, cool. I'm gonna add some blue to it, you know, add some whatever, and I'm gonna kind of like eyeball it to kind of get it working. No, don't do that. If you do that, stop it. Be better, right? So what I like to do is start from the background, start from the tone that's setting up the entire image, right? Because your background is encompassing the entire image. And so those colors are going to influence everything inside, right? If you've ever done a painting and you actually started from the foreground and work back, it can be very difficult to take that painting anywhere because, you know, as you like, let's say you painted the character and then you painted the background or like the floor under them or whatever. And then you realize that the character is too dark or too light. And then you have to like kind of backtrack and fix that. And you have to do this kind of back and forth dance. If you start from as far back as you can, the envelope shape of whatever this scene is, it makes it a lot easier to kind of like, you know, get that right. Because you see this, how my value scheme right here is actually a lot lighter. Like when you look at it, it's actually not as like different as you might think, like, or like as visually different. You can kind of squint down, you kind of see how they generally speaking work together, right? But when you actually color pick this and you fill it out, right, it's actually a lot darker than, you know, you might believe, right? You see how dark that got? And so now it's kind of setting the tone for those trees in front of it. So I'm gonna grab, you know, one of these trees right there. And, you know, I'm just kind of picking something that's like roughly in the same ballpark, right? And we're just kind of running, right? So now, boom, that's a tree that's a little bit closer. Pick this tree there. And the reason you start from back to front is because now I can judge. Now I'm like, okay, cool. This needs to be less blue. This needs to be more blue, whatever it is, right? And then we'll adjust it as we go. But, you know, the understanding is there, right? And then here, I'm going to clip into this one. G, boom, right? Now we're getting somewhere. You see that? Beautiful. I'm going to grab this lighter ground in the back. Right, right. See what I'm saying? Dude, it does itself, bro. It does itself. Dude. And it's funny too, because like I color picked right here. And I'm seeing like this warmer kind of color, right? Like it looks legit like, you know, like brown, you know what I mean? But it's actually like dark blue. Like it's just desaturated dark blue compared to the other blues. And that's like the deceiving part. You know, I think that oftentimes, you know, when we're trying to like just color match by eye, right? There's this tendency for us to kind of, you know, saturate things a little more or create those differences a lot more than we would normally think. And so for me, a lot of this is just like, I want to do it this way just because I'm, I guess, forced to be a little more accurate in accordance to that reference, right? So let's pick this color right here. Do this one. See, it's like dark blue. That's wild. That's weird. I understand there's like, you know, color filters and stuff happening on this. So I'm not like blind to that fact, but you know, we can adjust that later, right? Let's go dark greenish here. Nice. Now it's working, right? Now we're getting somewhere. Let's get that color. Let's do that one. And this is a lot of me guessing too. Like I don't really know how this is going to turn out, right? But it's an educated guess, right? It's something where it's like it's close, and then now I can, you know, I can start making those decisions on my own, right? Sick. Grab that color. Yeah, this guy's a hack, dude. He's just like stealing colors. Oh no. Dude, I steal color palettes like this all day. I think once I like kind of learned this, once I like started figuring this out, dude, I don't say life got easy, but like, bro, it, I don't know. It does a lot. All right. What am I looking for? I have the leaf. Oh, where's that one back there? It's right there. Let's grab this tone. Boom. See, like sometimes it kind of like, you know, things don't work out, but now like I have most of the painting and I can kind of get it to where I need it to go, right? I'm gonna go a little bit darker, a little bit more green because, you know, green colors, right? You know what I'm saying? And then, yeah, we're just kind of working through it. Let's see. Those rocks. I'll probably do this ground tone again. Boom. Easy, easy, right? And people say color's hard. Please. This is actually the hard part, right? This is the just getting set up. This is the, hey, you're kind of close. You know what I mean? And then we'll go from there. Let's see. Oops. It is wild how I guess how light or dark some of these things are. I'll desaturate that. Get that in a better zone. Sick. All right. Boom. Dope. And then last rock. Let's go. And these darker colors, I'm not saying they don't matter as much, but it is a little less important, right? Because like, check this out. So I have that rock in the bottom left kind of there. I mean, it's whatever, it's a shape, whatever color it might be. But like, you know, if you change it to whatever color, it's almost going to be okay, right? And this is actually a tip that I found really helpful from one of my teachers. He was saying that the darker your color gets, like look how red that is. And it's like, okay, you know what I mean? But he was saying the darker things get, the more color variation you can kind of like squeeze in there, right? Especially in the darker shadows area. You can kind of like spice it up with like 100% saturation, but keep things really dark. And it'll kind of give your shadows like a little bit more life. But in the light side, you do have to kind of work a little grayer, generally speaking. Unless you like really know what you're doing, because you know it can get like, you know, like Skittle throw up essentially, right? So just kind of be careful of that. But yeah, that's it's a really helpful tip because it makes your colors feel vibrant. You ever see those gray paintings? Not gray, but like these artists where they paint like really gray, right? But then you don't really like feel that I don't know, that you don't really feel that desaturated muddiness that you get like maybe when you paint. Not you, but you know, when I paint with super saturated colors, sometimes it just gets like super muddy, and then you paint with grays, it's super muddy. It's like, well, you know, you're trying to find that balance. So by the candlelight says, I've heard that too. Hello, by the way, it looks good so far. Thank you. Yeah, it's, you know, it's super helpful. I think and it was cool. Like the way my teacher kind of explained it was like really finding like edges between things. Like if you go like, let's say like this tree, right? Oops. This tree right here. And I lock this, pick that color, full saturation, complete opposite color, left the value the same, right? When you actually put it in, you know, it's not that weird, right? It is different. Obviously you really can't tell. And I'll probably lighten it up so we get that better. I'll probably keep it like that. There you go. Right. It's really easy. Like that shadow shape, like that shadow color really does work. It's not completely off, right? And the more saturated you get towards edges, right? So for example, I pick this color and I'll flip that as well. And if I keep that towards the edge right here, right? Super saturated, like kind of colors that don't really belong there. You can kind of get away with that a little more too, right? And it was a lot of like that class. It was a digital painting class, but my teacher was teaching at the time. And he was just basically showing us tricks on like how to sneak color in. And it was actually really cool. So, all right, cool. Let's see. All right, base colors done, right? And then if they ever ask you, they're like, "Hey, did you come up with those colors by yourself?" And you look them dead in the eyes, and you say, "Hell yeah," because you know what I mean. Like that's just the way. If you get questioned, you just own it. You know what I mean? You're like, dude. That's why you pay me, dog. You know, that's why you make the big bucks, because I do color like a master. In reality, you're just really good at like color picking. You know what I mean? I'll say it like that, but so now it might not be 100%. It might not be like, you know, fully there. Like that tree is a little bluer than I kind of want, the tilted over one, the diagonal one. It's like, you know, some of these things are a little bluer than what I kind of want versus kind of what's happening in the thing. Maybe I color picked the wrong area or whatever. But at the end of the day, you're like most of the way, a good 70%. And then now we kind of go in, paints a few select things, kind of incorporate some other ideas. And I mean, you know what I'm saying? We're pretty close. So, okay.
I have a question, Kenny.
So, dude.
Yeah, since you're using different references for different sources for all of your different keyframes, I was wondering if you have any tips for like maintaining some harmony between all of them.
Yeah. So,
or if there's like particular things.
yeah, that's a great question, right? Because I have for those popping in either later or I guess just seeing this now, we have 1, 2, 3, 6 references here, right? And it's like, oh shit, okay, there's some warmer ones, there's some cooler ones. All you really have to remember, right? Because the whole point of this color key, right, is that it's a specific section in this sequence that has a particular amount of color in it, right? Like, because each one of these moments, there's like a bunch of other moments. Like these aren't, this isn't an animation, right? This isn't like frame for frame what's going to happen in the movie. This is like the different chunks, as if like, when they do a cut, essentially, right? And so all we're really looking for is how do we go from here? Oops. Let's make that red. How do we go from this section to this section, right? This section over here, right? Or even here, if this is like one of the more impactful moments, right? And so you just want to show that color relationship. All you have to understand is, okay, this is, this and this, right? If you compare those two, well, this is clearly bluer, right? More towards blue than this one is, right? And so you just have to kind of remember that, right? And then you have the value scale to kind of, or the value breakdown to kind of help you with that, right? You have, it's not like these are like probably what, 10% apart, right? They're really not that different. There is a percentage of light. Like if I take this, hold up, let me show you. Where's my, there it is. It is this one and this one. Yeah, cool. So if I take these two, merge them, lock them, filter, blur, Gaussian blur, right? There is a percentage of light difference, right? Like you can tell that the one to the right is a tad bit darker, right? Obviously these parts are basically the same, which makes sense. But then here we're at like what, 26%. Over here we're looking at an 8%. Even in that lighter section, we're looking at 15s, 24, the super bright area. But that proportion is different, right? We're looking at this big section there. Oops, let's go full red. This big section here versus that small section there. And there's the value progression, right? So all you're really trying to do is make sure you get your value transition right and get your hue transition right. And you'll probably be in like the ballpark of kind of what you're looking for, right? Because you have reference, you're not going to be like that far off. But the whole point is you can't, you don't want to get darker, right? You don't want to get like too contrasty. Like this can't go to pure white back there, like behind the wolf section, right? This can't go to pure white because, that's not how the story beat is, but neither is the reference. So it doesn't matter anyway. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, it just,
Thank you.
it's a bit of like eyeballing and checking, but yeah, that's why I also like working this way too, like in this kind of super layered format, right? Because if I am a little off, right? Like, oh, okay, cool. The background is a little lighter than I initially planned. Cool. Let's darken that down. Let's go the other way or whatever, right? You have a little bit of freedom to kind of mess with things. I get this stage kind of blocked out for everything first. And then I go in to like fine tune and kind of, paint things up and make it less shapely, right? So, but yeah. Yeah, great question, dude. Vishal says, do you use RGB sliders? I don't. I'm not a I was gonna say I'm not a psychopath, but some people do use RGB sliders. So I don't actually know how they work that well. I mean, I know what it is, right? I know that like that, is red, green, blue, and you're kind of mixing in reds or you're kind of removing greens or whatever it is from this equation, but I never really quite understood it. I guess, how do you go darker? This is crazy. Does anybody know? Anybody here use RGB? I'm just curious. Nobody.
I use lab. I don't use RGB.
Lab sliders. Who uses lab sliders? All right, man. What's the logic here?
There's a really good video out. Mike Azevedo did it, but that's just going to control like your value, and then you control kind of like your saturation group in the middle, and then you can go cooler and warmer on the bottom.
Wait, how does this control my saturation group though? It's like going green and red or green and pink.
Yeah, you kind of like slide both the bottom together, or I might have mixed it up, but I find it comfortable trying to like find colors that way.
Dude, that's like, I don't know, man. That's big brain moves, dude. I can't do that. Cause like
It's a little weird.
I mean, you know, you're cool. You know, it's fine. You're not weird. But I'm like trying to.
I'm cool being cool. That's fine.
I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, so let's say I want red. Like, okay, can you pick colors like straight? Like if I told you, hey, I need a red, can you do that?
Oh, out of this?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just slide over to the right a little bit towards that red area, and then you'd slide that bottom as well, just more to the red, and it gets darker and darker, and then you get the middle. You can choose the darker value on the top. And the blues are typically to the left, and more warmer colors are typically to the right, and that's for both the top and bottom groups. So like say if you chose like a green in that middle, then you can choose the warmer green if you slide that on the right more.
Oh.
And then you get a cooler green if you slide to the left more.
That's wild, dude. That is weird. That's I can see the logic. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. And then yeah, I guess if you have your color, you want a darker version or lighter version, you can do that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Ah, we learn something new every day, dude. There you go. RGB is still for psychopaths, right?
Try the
100%.
HSB one.
The HSB ones?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I
I
use.
think that's the most common.
Yeah, this is for normal people. I'm just kidding, but no, it's like because yeah, you're looking at this, right? Like I guess the way I use it, you know, it's just hue, right? Cool. Like if whenever I'm painting, I'm like, cool, I want more towards yellow or away from yellow, right? Because I'm actually when I see it, I'm seeing a circle. I actually prefer this in a color wheel format like this. I actually do it this way more often. Oh shit, my face is on the live streams. You can't see that, but like I usually do this more often. But just for like live stream stuff, I switched it to that square, so it's a little more like perfect. But yeah, I don't really use that triangle very much because I do this. I'll like, oh yeah, I need something warmer, cooler, right? And then I'll do like desat, and I'll kind of like, you know, I guess calculate my way to colors to kind of get that right. So, but I don't know, man. I'm just an average guy. I don't know. I don't have these tricks. All right. So let's do this. Oh yeah, comments. Do you ever incorporate a color dynamic brush early in the base colors? I try not to. The reason for that is because for me, color dynamics doesn't really do much other than kind of add interest, and it's like a 10% detail for me, right? Because, you know, for example, like let's actually do it right now. Let's color pick that. Let's do hard round. Boom, color dynamics. And for those that don't know, it's just you know, you put hue jitter. It's going to jitter it by like 5%, right? So here I'll just do a quick demo of that. For those that don't know, right? You have, if you do apply per tip, you kind of get this rainbowing effect, but what it's doing is it's just kind of jittering the color 5% to the right, 5% to the left, and is giving you different tones of blue, so you kind of get a little bit more of that interest. I don't like starting that way because it can kind of mess with what that base color is, but I'll do it after the fact, right? Like I'll do it later if I truly need it. But I tend not to, right? Just because the stuff that I work on, it tends to be like, I guess, more finished, right? There's a higher fidelity in a lot of the work that I don't say forced to do, but that I'm told to do. And so a lot of clients in my experience don't really like seeing that because they're like, oh, what's up with all that noise? You know, just smooth it out or whatever. So, you know, obviously some people do, right? There's plenty of artists that do great work that don't do that, or that do that and just kind of leave it in there. But I've found that it's just kind of like flavoring, right? Because, you know, you get most of the way there with this. This is the tone that's set. And a lot of times it's not something that's applicable in a 3D setting, and oftentimes, right? Because, you know, for us, this color key or my concepts are made by somebody. Somebody has to like take that and do something with it, right? And so there's a tendency for that not to show up in the final product. So I try to avoid doing it because going down the line, they don't really do that in like modeling and texturing and all that stuff. There's usually like a solid color. They might like kind of paint on a texture or whatever that has like the color variations in there, right? But that's something else, right? So cool. All right, so I actually kind of backtracked on what I just did there just now because I wanted to talk about something. So this is, I guess, me on the first round of color picking, right? Where I'm like, okay, I kind of picked some things in the background. I just kind of applied it, right? And so things are kind of off. It's not like perfect. You know, there's some things that, you know, don't look that great. But what I'm doing here is I need to kind of adjust things to kind of fit in the palette a little bit better. That tree is a little too blue. The tree like behind it, like this, these trees right there, they're a little too light on this left one versus like some of those right ones. So I need to kind of go back in and do some adjustments. But what I want you to know is, let's start with this first one. It's a little too blue, right? The tendency is to be like, okay, cool. Well, let's go towards brown then, right? Or like it's, you know, it's a tree, so there's brown associated. You can even like color balance it, right? Where like, oh, I want a little more red or whatever it is, right? But I would highly recommend start with your saturation, right? Because sometimes it is the right color, right? Our eyes kind of play a trick on us where you're like, oh, okay, that seems a little too blue, but you are in the right zone. If you desaturate, you see how much more brown that feels? You know what I mean? So what I'm trying to explain here is if you automatically kind of jump to the conclusion of I need more brown, so you're going to move that way, you kind of get this rainbowy effect where every color is like full saturation or very saturated, very standard colors that you're just used to picking, right? Trees brown, so I pick brown. And you can have different variations of brown, but you're kind of always picking like red car equals red or green grass equals green, instead of thinking, you know, warms and cools and how that plays with each other. So if you're a little bit newer to colors, play with your saturation first before you feel the need to change the hue, because sometimes the hue is right. You know, maybe you just picked the wrong one in relationship to others, right? But you know, this blue that I put for this tree is just a little bit too close for where it is in this frame, right? In this reference frame. So just be careful of that. It's very easy to jump to that conclusion of like, oh, it needs to be more orange or it needs to be more brown, essentially, right? So I'll pick brown, but it just doesn't look right. So start with saturation, and then value, and then hue, right? Hue is usually the last one, especially if you did the color picking from here, right? Because this color palette is unified, right? It does work, right? Because clearly we're seeing it, right? It looks good already. It's just whenever you changed the context of those colors, your mistake, or my mistake in this case, was that I put that blue a little too close, and there's a little too much atmospheric perspective in that blue, essentially. So I need to remove that. So start with saturation, and your colors will usually look a lot better and more sophisticated than they would if you just kind of like, oh yeah, this tree needs to be brown. And then you kind of end up with like rainbow colors, right? Because, we want sophisticated colors. We don't want, just every color, right? Same here, right? So that, this tree looked pretty good, right? It's just like, it's blue and the value is a little light, right? So I'm like, okay, cool. A little too blue, desaturate that. It actually gets me to the brown that I'm looking for. And I just need to go a little bit darker. And then there you go, right? Things are feeling a little more natural, right? The colors are playing a little bit nicer together, right? So that's kind of what I like to do. So do it for all these, actually. There you go. Dude, look at that. And that's how you're like, when they're like, dude, I can't believe that's not brown. It's just straight up like cyan colored, But it's because you know your color theory. It's because you're a gangster, right? It's because you know what you're doing. Put something like that. A little more towards blue. I want that saturation in there. There you go. Cool, right? It's working out. It's doing something. We're on the way. I wanna add a little bit of blue to him because, like I was saying earlier, with my with this thing here, right? We had the we had that blue triangle, right? And well, I was thinking it's like a bluish kind of fox, right? You know, because felt like it. And then now, right? I just gotta kind of match some stuff. So pretty chill. And then boom, easy. Let's see. And now, right? So we're missing some things, right? Because right now I kind of color picked everything, so it's all flat colors. Other than this one gradient right here, right? Everything's pretty flat. So I'm gonna start grabbing some of these atmospheric colors or these background colors and start to introduce them into my layer. So I'm, you know, you can either alpha lock it or kind of create a clipping mask, and you know, you kind of start working it in, right? Where it's like, okay, some areas might need that, other areas like here don't, right? And you can kind of just start fine tuning the way this this scene kind of looks, right? And now I have this more sophisticated gradient from back to front. You can do the same thing with the road here, right? And I'm using the colors that are in the scene to kind of help me get there, right? Even though I am color picking, right, from the reference, you know, I'm trying to maintain the same color palette, because if you're not really used to colors, if you're not, you know, if you're somebody that is, you know, I guess a little less experienced in color, right? Not that I'm like mega experienced or anything, but you know, there's a tendency for colors to always be like the full saturated, or at least like above 50, right? Above 50 saturation in everything you do. And that just doesn't look good, generally speaking, right? The best color artists that are around, they're really, really good at gray, right? It's making grays look really good that actually make you better at color in my slightly humble opinion. So, you know, just thinking about like, you know, how do I add the colors from the scene to make this scene feel a little more united, right? Because you don't want to kind of color pick or color slide too much, because now you're picking outside of that color gamut that you've kind of set up, essentially, you know? Cool. All right. But yeah, I think in terms of color, I mean, that's really about it, right? I mean, obviously there's, you know, there's more for sure. But in terms of like what we want to talk about, right? In terms of this kind of exercise, you know, understanding the reasons why we do things, understand how we approach this once we start getting into this more sophisticated realm, right? This is basically it. You know, we're not too far from now just having to finish this painting if we truly needed to, right? I mean, I'm not say finish, so I'm gonna take this like a medium plus level finish. Hopefully each of them, but we'll see how that goes. But yeah, you know, this is basically it. So if there's any questions on like anything else, like if you guys want to talk about like any other topics or anything like that, just let me know. We can kind of break into that realm at this point. So see, that doesn't work. That's desat that. That's better.
Do you I don't know, maybe I'm just being selfish, but do you want to try a gradient map?
Try a gradient map? I don't know if I can do this here, because what's gonna happen? Like, I guess is if we try it, right? It's gonna mess with my I guess structure so far, right? I can try it.
Oh, the gradient map, not the gradient.
Yeah. Hold up. Let's see. Let's grab one of the other ones and see. Boom.
Because I want to see if it would work on the values.
It might, but what I will say, because I have used gradient maps before, or I've attempted to use it before. Let me save this real quick before I lose it. So like, you know, let's say we did this one, right?
Yeah.
And then go to gradient maps, right? How to do that again?
The semicircle.
Semicircle. Oops. Gradient.
And then
where are you at? Gradient?
No.
Gradient map.
I keep on forgetting where it is too.
So
yeah, right there. And then now you can go in there and choose all the values. So the darkest value over there will be your darkest one that you have in your scene only. And it'll pick some that you have near you. So you just keep on adding in colors or adding in pieces. But then you can get like a lot more control. So then if you add like a mid-tone, which would be the middle color picker, then you can get all your mid-tones a certain color.
Let's see. Let's go. Let's try it. Let's see if I can match that tone in the top right. Let's see what happens. And then
Oh, you have to hit OK on the.
And then let's hit another oopsies. So if I did something like this, oopsies. How do I delete one?
You pull it down. So grab it and pull it down.
All right, cool. There you go. So those, oopsies. Let's just fix that one real quick. Reds, okay. Let's go blues.
So yeah, now that'll be like your lightest hue now, your lightest value.
Gotcha. Something like that. Cool. If I pick like here, double click that. Let's go towards greens. See, I think my issue with a lot of gradient maps is that, I guess if I was a better artist, I'll say it like that, but if I was,
Well,
go ahead. What were you saying?
you do this, but then you put it as a multiply layer.
Ah, okay. So wait, multiply, turn the whole thing, click OK, select the whole thing to multiply.
Yes, or that or overlay. If it's a darker image, I typically do overlay, but if it's a lighter image, then I do multiply.
So like, let me ask you this, like, okay, so I do this, right? And then let's say I was accurate, right? Or like better at this. I would then clip it into every single layer, right? Just to kind of get it in the right tone.
Yeah, and you could do that, and say if you wanted to put it on an image that you had earlier, you could use this instead of having to like color the whole next image. You could just take this gradient and then up the value of some of them, or change the color of maybe one of the values that you had, and then that like would get color out quicker, or at least in some cases.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool. I definitely I do understand the value of it. Like I do like gradient maps, right? And there some like better artists than me can do it a lot better. But my issue with this is this. So let's say right now I have two different, like I guess mid-tone or like high values, right? Like let's say these two here. So I have this back here, right? That kind of hole, the tree hole, right? And then I have this dappled light right here, right? But those two colors are very different, right? And I think if I set the color map on it, it's because they're the same value or roughly the same value, it's going to make it the same color, correct?
Yeah, and that's when I would use either another gradient map or just put your own color in that separate spot, because it's such a small difference.
Yeah.
But it's like a separate gradient map, and then you could kind of, what I do typically is like then blend in kind of the middle area, or where I want it to be kind of switching into the next color.
Yeah.
Or the next gradient map. But I see what you're saying. It gets a little complex and convoluted.
Yeah, because you get a bunch of different. So this is something where, for example, like whenever I teach my classes, right? The reason we do it this way, right? The reason why I keep things very separate is it's not just I guess a preference on my end. It's also a production experience thing where, so for example, I have an image here and they're like, hey, we don't like that fox. Cool, right? Let's get rid of it, right? Or, change it with something else. And it kind of makes things very adjustable, right? So every layer, and it takes, I don't know, maybe if you were to time, like me doing it this way, and then somebody that's experienced at gradient maps doing it that way, I'm sure there's somebody that can probably do it faster. But I think for me, it's the flexibility that I enjoy, where you're like, cool. Oh, I don't really like this green. I can, all the grass, because it's all separated out, I guess in a good way. It's like, oh, it's all red for some reason. This world is weird or whatever. I don't know. And like you get that full control, because now if you were to do the gradient map, right? You have to clip everything in, merge it all down, and then keep separating it. And then your values also changed from here to here, right? And I think it kind of leaves for me a lot to chance, where it's like, it's not me fully controlling it, because I control the values and the color and the hue and everything like perfectly in this. And then when I go to paint, which I'll show you guys a little bit of this week and next week, how fast this can actually go with a very sophisticated kind of color arrangement. I feel like the just with the control I have on there, I don't know if I'd ever do gradient maps as much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's cool though. I mean, I think because I've seen, dude, there's some Chinese artists out there that, dude, they kill it. I don't know what happens. I don't know how or why, but they just go like they're so good at using, you know, I guess gradient maps and stuff like that. But even then, to be honest, I feel like a lot of it isn't applicable in a production setting, right? Because you get like this, especially like in a color key, like where it needs to be hyper specific, because what they're doing oftentimes, right, from what I've seen, is they have like very gray paintings that there's a lot of color hue jitter. There's a lot of like a bunch of cool things kind of happening. But it's really hard to tell what color it actually is. You know what I mean? Like it's like, you know, it's a blend of like a bunch of different colors, and it looks beautiful, but in a informative kind of way, it's not really as strong as it could be. And whenever
it's not enough information.
Yeah, right. It's just like not really quite, like, you know, it's a lot of grays. And so now it's really hard to kind of match that, because you're like, you know, what do I do, you know? So
yeah.
What's happening with this? There you go. I gotta watch that. All right, cool. Cool. How's it going, guys? How's life? We had a lot of explaining today. The color week, it's like whenever we talk about our color keys and stuff, it's like it's very there's a lot of like, I guess, information to kind of absorb, and I kind of like blaze through a lot of it, like this whole structure here. I guess, you know, it takes a second to kind of know that, but once you get it, once you understand like what I'm doing here, it does make it a lot easier to kind of go about it, right? And like from this process, you know, we're gonna take this, maybe not this one specifically, whatever we pick next week, but take one to like full completion, right? And like, or not full completion, like completion for a color key. And like you'll kind of see how quick we go from, you know, one painting being pretty okay to like the rest of the paintings like moving fast. So but at this point, I'm really just kind of messing with everything else, you know what I mean? Like there's some lighting here. I'm gonna colorize that, make that, you know, whatever it needs to be. I want this to be blue, yellow, a little bit of yellow light, warm light. No. Yeah, cool blue is fine. So sick. I do have some things I want to talk about with everybody here. But if there's any questions, I'd love to kind of talk about what you guys have in mind, and then we'll kind of move into some other topics. So for you guys in the Discord or YouTube, feel free. Kind of give you guys a second to do all that.
I do have one question.
So, dude.
So essentially, like, if we were to do any sort of like coloring and stuff, like gradient map, like having the layer and like paint bucket tool, and then like adjusting HSP is pretty much what the technique is here.
Yeah.
Of all the things that we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. It's the logic, like really, like whatever process you end up going with, right? Do it that way, right? Whatever you feel like doing, but just understand like there's a reason to the madness, essentially, right? There's going to be a purpose behind a lot of this. So just understand that no matter how you get to your colors, right? We set up a reference for a reason. This image exists, and so whenever you're in production, right? It's like, okay, let's do it this way first. Whenever you're a student, I give reference to students all the time, where I'm like, hey, I want you to paint a painting with this kind of color palette or whatever, right? And then it comes back and it's like changed, or it's a little bit different, or things aren't really quite there, right? In production, you have to be spot on, right? They gave you that reference for a reason, right? There's no like changing things because you couldn't get the colors right or things weren't feeling right. They'll make you go back and fix it, right? They're like, this doesn't look anything like the reference that we gave you. Go and fix that, right? And that's where, you know, one of the the reasons why we kind of do it this way, because this is hyper accurate and flexible, right? Hyper accurate as in I color picked it. There is no, I didn't mess that up. It's, you know, at the very least, you can kind of tell how it, you know, when you squint down, they look like they're from the same scene, right? And that's really what we're looking for. You just need something that's like pretty close, right? From there, this is kind of where we'll start getting into like texturing or like start kind of pushing this a bit further. But just understand that, you know, in production, they want accuracy because somebody, right, usually your production designer, your art director, whoever, painstakingly sat there and like spent hours planning out this sequence. And, you know, you have, and it's been approved by like 10 people at this point, right? Like the director saw it, the production designer saw it, the whoever saw it. And that's kind of where, you know, there's a lot of like hands that you can't really change it anymore. You know what I'm saying?
Definitely. And my next question was about the whole texturing, but I think you were gonna cover that in a bit, so I think we're good from here.
Yeah, we'll do. I might get into it. We have like 45 minutes left, so like I mean, this is basically like you can kind of tell where it's going from here, right? It's like now just paint it, now just be good at your job, right? But yeah, I'll kind of show you how I kind of get into it. If, you know, for you and for others that have taken my class, you know what I'm about to do. But yeah, that's the idea.
I have another question.
What's up, dude?
A second. How would you feel about combining multiple references for your color palette?
Oh, absolutely. That happens all the time. Like I think for me, I got a little bit lucky. I don't say lucky, but I got with doing this, right? I got just a little bit lucky with some of the forest, and it's a forest, so it's pretty easy. To be honest, though, I this middle, not the middle one, the flower one right here, I actually got semi lucky with it. In the sense that, you know, there's kind of something where it has like that kind of bottom glow, but still colder moonlight kind of feel from the sky, right? And you can kind of see how that might like translate in, right? But yeah, all the time, like if you have something where it's like, it doesn't really quite work out. Like for example, like this one right here might be a good example of that, right? Where you have this kind of like, so the bottom scene is kind of cold blue, right? And there's no real strong light in the scene yet, right? But in my scene, in my thumbnail, there's a light in the background kind of signaling to us where she needs to go, right? And so with that signaling, I don't have a reference for that color in my reference, in my chart here. So I would probably need to kind of show something where I do like dark forest, right? So going into shot deck here, like I've said to everyone before, if you're not using shot deck, you're messing up. Forest, and then I'll type in night. So, you know, let's say, I don't know. Let's actually do this because I'm actually missing that piece now that I look at it. We have, yeah, exclude nudity is on, so we're not getting canceled today. Not that all my shit talking is already gonna do that, but whatever. That's kind of cool. That's a maybe. This is a maybe, right? Come back to that. And you see how useful this is? I just typed in forest night, and it gives you a bunch of different forest scenes, a bunch of them at night. Some of them, you know, not so, but you know, you get pretty close. Look at that. That's sick. That's kind of cool. That back there, that's kind of sick. Or like that. Dude, there you go. So what I'd probably do, right, get something like this, or what I'd probably get, to be honest, right, is like my production designer, whoever, would be like, okay, cool. So then now we have this scene here, and he would circle this. Boom. He'd be like, you know, it's mostly this, which is what we have already established, and then he'll go like that, and he'll point there, you know, and you just kind of know, like, okay, cool. Now just blend the two. It's a warmer color palette because, right, as you know, we're going back to here. We're going back to the safer area, right? So you want that safer color to kind of be represented there, and so that's a lot of the notes, and you know, they do that in the feedback section just to kind of walk me through what they're looking for. They'll plan all this out for you. You know what I mean? So. Cool. All right. I think we're good. I think we're good on the base colors. I'll kind of basically just start painting at this point. I'll put this on my second monitor so you don't need to see it anymore. I might kind of reference it here and there, but I'm just kind of adjusting shapes right now and getting things in a better kind of like, you know, just like do this leaf, these leaves, they do the work, bro. And for everybody, like if you're like doing a project, especially, you know, like something that is repetitive, right? Because like color keys are very repetitive. It's all the same location, generally speaking, right? And so just make it a brush, make it an asset, you know, do whatever it is you need to do so you don't have to keep painting that thing, because you see how, like, you know, I'm just adding complexity and people know what's happening. You know, it's like it's not that far from being finished, to be honest. It's like 60%. You know, from here I'll start doing some of the fun stuff in a second, but this is the main kind of color key idea we're kind of going for, right? I kind of merge some of these together so our layers don't get too crazy. All right. So I have a scene that is a scene, right? Things are happening and we're cool with it, right? So from here, actually, I don't need this this levels layer anymore. Remember how I did that earlier to get my values right? Don't need that. So from here, now I want to start kind of painting and making things, you know, make sense, right? So I'm just going to grab some of the major pieces and then start kind of giving it that treatment, right, of whatever it needs to be. So I'm going to start lassoing things out, start creating these other shapes. Like I'm going to get these top planes on these rocks first because I want to kind of understand the forms a certain way, right? So I'm just doing that. Boom. Oops. Boom. Something like that. Grab that sky tone. And this is where I want you to kind of understand, right? I try not to make up colors as much as possible because, for one, it always kind of ends up being whatever habit you've developed, right? Not always, but, you know, generally speaking. I don't know. If you're kind of like newer to colors and stuff, right? And what I like to do is this. I'll just kind of, you know, make some things. I'll just do what I need to do here, right? Cool. Oops. So I'm like, let's erase that to that top plane. And I'll kind of get it roughly in the ballpark of like where I want those shapes to be, right? Something like that. Sure. And then you can do a couple things. I usually try to just turn the opacity down, right? Something like that. It's like, you know, like maybe I want that to be a little bit stronger, or maybe I want it to be a little bit weaker, right? And I'll kind of go from there. Like, do I like that? And I kind of do, right? So I'll color pick that, and then full opacity, and then just fill that out, right? Oopsies. What did I just do there? Is that... Hold up. I was at 10, wasn't I? Something like that. That's cool. Okay. Why is that look red? That's so odd. Cool. So I just have, you know, now I have a more kind of built out color, right? There's a color that's, you know, supposed to kind of be there, and I didn't have to like sit there and like kind of calculate it out in kind of a weird way. I just used my layer adjustments to kind of get me in the ballpark, and then from there, you know, I can kind of paint and do my thing, right? Now you know how to paint rocks and do stuff, so you know, that's what's happening. Now I'm gonna kind of adjust these shapes to make it look a little bit better. Oops. Sorry about the noise.
Can't believe it.
I know, dude. Let's go. Looking spiffy.
I refuse to buy mechanical keyboards. I'm anti-mechanical.
Are you really?
Yeah, I like chiclet keys.
I do too.
Silent.
Can you hear?
Easy to
Can you
press.
guys hear my keyboard presses? My mic is like a foot away from the thing, so you might be able to.
Yeah.
Is it
A little
loud?
bit.
Is it
Not
aggressive? Okay, cool.
No.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of mechanical keyboards. I do like, because I have the Logitech MX like Master something. and it's like laptop keyboard essentially, and I like it because it's like the travel on the key is a lot shorter, so I don't have to like press as hard or press as far. Because I had a mechanical keyboard back in like 2016, and like the travel distance was a lot further, and actually like my hand was hurting just because like that little bit of difference. And once I switched back to a more like a I guess the laptop style, it kind of went away. So some people swear by it, but you know, they also like probably piss off their coworkers. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Some people swear by it. I swear against it.
yeah.
Aha.
I did want to talk about that too. It's funny because like I as an instructor, I oftentimes get the question of like, oh, you know, what are like wrist exercises or like what are carpal tunnel things you can do to kind of, you know, mitigate that, right? Like to not get it essentially. And like, you know, it's coming from people that are like their hands are already hurting. I'm like, dude, that's bad, right? Because something really important to understand is when you're like a student, this is the least amount that you'll probably ever work. Yeah, I don't want to say it like that, but you know what I mean? Like when you start working, you're doing like a lot more, right? Because as a student, like I was working a lot, right? Like, you know, I mean, everyone believes that they work a lot. So who truly knows, right? But, you know, really, whenever I'm, you know, as a student, like I'm not working the full 8 hours. I'm not working like, you know, you're there, you're active, the file's open and you're looking at it, but you're not like moving the whole time. And sometimes, you know, you're like maybe not doing as much, but as a professional, right? You're doing a lot more, like way more than you would usually think. And it's like if you're having carpal tunnel issues, right? Like really take that seriously because, you know, understand that like you're at this point where it only gets worse from here. You know what I mean? So just like be careful of that for those that are like, you know, I guess like you're kind of getting hand pains and stuff like that. That's why like I'll switch keyboards. I'll do whatever I need to do. I'll switch mouses. I have a Logitech MX Master 3 mouse, right? It's nothing crazy, but you know, at the very least, it's not like the Apple Magic Mouse, right? Like, you know, we're not. You want something that, you know, at the very least, kind of helps you out, right? Something that gets you to, I don't know, just a better posture, better form, whatever it is. Because as a working professional, you're doing like 5 or 6 times more than you are as a student, generally speaking. Because usually, as a professional, especially in the earlier years, you're like a professional and a student, right? You're like constantly like doing, you know, multiple things where you're working, and then on top of that, you're also, you know, taking classes to not get fired, you know. So
Yeah, that's where I'm at. My RSI creeped back in during my 3D class, doing 6 hours a day of just clicking and middle mouse clicking.
yeah, it's like something that maybe you're not used to as well. Like, I guess because I had that problem too when I first started picking up Blender. I started using my mouse more than usual, right? It started becoming more of a, I guess, a thing that, you know, because you have to, right? I mean, you don't have to, but I was using the mouse versus like the tablet, and my some of my pain started kind of coming back, and I was like, oh shit, you know, and yeah, I had to like fix it. I had to do whatever I could to kind of get that to, you know, not kill me. Because, yeah, that sucks.
I've stopped the Blender for class for 2.5 weeks now, but I go and touch my computer and my RSI flares up still. So
Really? Damn, dude.
yeah, it's not. I don't feel it while I'm drawing, but me drawing probably isn't helping.
Gotcha. Damn. Where's this? I'm cleaning up some of my layers right now, so hold up. I'm just trying to figure that out.
I don't know if this helps, but I did amateur boxing for 3 years, and then I also the training they would have us do was crazy. It was like 500 push-ups a day, and then on top of that, with all that running, and I would go to, punching stuff and people in heavy bags, and I would go to draw, and it would be so painful in every joint in my right hand. But I started doing these wrist exercises where you literally just put your whole body weight on them, like you're doing a push-up, but you just bend your wrist, and you get it like rotating around and around and around, and I don't have pain in my hand anymore.
Oh, dope. That's good. Yeah, it's little things like that. They go a long way. It's like trying to find like what else you can do to kind of, I guess, try and mitigate some of those pains, right? I was doing a lot of like wrist exercises. I had like a small weight, I kind of like move it around. Or I had like this like kind of one of those grip things, you know what I'm talking about? Like one of those like hand grip things. And just to kind of do bigger movements, essentially. The whole idea was you're kind of doing a lot of small movements all the time versus like big, like, intentful movements. And that helped me out a lot.
Also, resistant bands, they are really good too.
Dope. We should do a whole like I think like not a workout. I don't want to say a workout thing, but like just like a whole like I don't know, post or something.
Kenny calisthenics,
dude. Not even, bro.
Like
I'm not your
medicine section.
I'm not your guy. I'm not the paragon of athletics here.
We'll get you out there.
I do recall, generally, other than good ergonomics, that just basic fitness is a good preventative for RSI. It's just, I don't do it because
you're like, but, I heard from a friend. I wouldn't know.
But get some push-ups and pull-ups in, do some curls, and it would be a good preventative.
Yeah, I need to get on that. We need to. So let's change this. I'm gonna die early at this rate.
I'll get y'all, man. Let's all do this. I'm not bragging, but let's all start running a mile a morning.
A mile a morning. I'll let you know when that happens.
Yeah. It's not bad. It takes like 6 minutes or no. It takes like, 10 minutes, 15 minutes for someone, and then, you get back, take that shower, feel all calm.
Yeah, true that. I'll
My wife told me I can't go around telling people that I used to work out anymore as if it's part of my identity, because she pointed out it's now been 8 years since I lifted heavy.
Oh, dude, that's how it is. It's crazy, man. Like especially as you're getting older. Not that I'm old or anything, but like I'll be like, oh yeah, I used to do that a lot, and then I'm like, oh shit, it's been like 10 years. My God.
Yeah.
Right. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, is there someone gonna say something?
No, I was gonna be annoying. I was gonna say there's always a time for a comeback.
There you go. Train like Rocky.
There is no tomorrow.
Where's that layer at? Son of a. Is it that one? No. Need to find my. That's empty. Where is my? There it is. Let me turn that off. So I'm just like fixing shapes. So this is something where like, it's just take the time and for everybody, like there is like whenever I'm painting, right, like I don't know if you feel this as well, but there's this pressure to move as fast as you can. I get this a lot where you get an assignment. Let's say they're like, hey, we need something by end of day or whatever, right? And you're like, I need to move faster, right? I need to move my fingers quicker, because if I don't, then I'm gonna miss this deadline or whatever it is, right? So you kind of rush into it. And I did, dude, as a junior, man, I did this so much where like, I'll kind of like, I have this, I guess, tendency to be like, oh shit, I gotta, and you're kind of just like bashing things in, like just get it in there, But as I kind of progressed and as I got better, right, I started slowing down and started getting myself like more comfortable, and like, I don't know, it forced me to, then set up my layers a little bit better, or like, slowing down, especially right now where you're like, I have something that's like kind of where I need it to be, right? Where it's like, oh, it's sort of, there's some shapes I need to fix, but overall it's pretty much there. And then I have one more step after this, which is kind of photo bash, not photo bash, but asset bash in this case. And then basically we're done with some effects on top of that. And, if I kind of start too early, right, you kind of run into this problem of like, you're kind of missing some steps. There's some things that really aren't quite lining up. But if you slow down and really make sure that everything is kind of like laid out perfectly for you, then it's going to usually work out a lot better, right? It's like slowing down to try to speed up essentially, right? So definitely like try that. Definitely, whenever you're painting and stuff like that, slow down. I think there's this rush of like, oh, I need to, kind of get things done a little bit quicker or whatever, right? But if you've noticed, like, especially like I've done some demos and stuff, or if you see like some of your teachers and stuff, and they're doing like demos or they're doing paintings, if you actually watch them, right? If you actually look at them when they're painting, especially during like a 2-hour demo or something like that, right? They're very calm. It's very like slow, right? But then all of a sudden you look up and you're like, oh shit, they're done. You know what I mean? This is just like that, and it's like, it's actually pretty crazy. And I'll talk to like some of my students or whatever about like, oh, just getting faster. And they're like, oh yeah, I'm trying to do speed paintings every day. I'm trying to do these things. And I'm like, no, just get good at whatever it is, whatever process you want to do, just get good at that. And the speed will come, but like if I'm working outside of my process, I'm slow as hell. It's terrible. It's like, it's an actual nightmare. But if I'm working like, the way I normally do, oh, it goes fast. It's weird how quick it is.
You heard it here first. And he says, just get good.
I don't know, man. It's tough. It's because I'll see a lot of people like they need to get faster. They need to do these things. And I'm like, all you got to do, man, is just figure out how you paint. Whatever it is, just figure it out. Just have a step-by-step process that doesn't make you go backwards. Because I think that's a big one. I think that's what I was saying earlier with like, there's certain steps that I don't do, and I explain this in my class a lot, where this process isn't. I would definitely say isn't intuitive. You know what I mean? It's not something that people are, I guess, used to doing, or even something that you kind of learn in a lot of your classes. But the reason I do it this way is because, it allows like flexibility, and it allows like a more dynamic kind of approach. It's not the most artistic, but at the end of the day, I'm a concept artist. We don't have to be the most artistic, right? We just have to communicate ideas, right? Oh, there you go. Dude, let's go.
Do you meet a lot of people who don't paint this way, Kenny?
What'd you say?
Do you meet a lot of people who don't paint this way? Because I never learned how to paint the traditional way, I guess. It's always been this layer-based digital approach.
It's starting to become more and more common. I would say it's funny because, you kind of get this more deceiving kind of like look, right? Because for me, it really comes down to like, when are you deviating from this? Because it's hilarious. There's painters that are like that paint super loose, right? They're known for like their looser approaches, and then when you actually like see the way somebody paints, right? They start this way and then they mess it all up, right? Then they go in with their smudge brush and their texture brushes and all that stuff. And it's actually like fun to kind of watch because I'll have students that, I don't want to say fight me on this, but there is a level of like, oh, this person said that, and I'm like, cool, man, and then I'll actually like, I'm like, oh, I know that person. They don't paint that way. You know what I mean? It's just like it's perceived that they paint that way just because they're whoever they are, right? And it's just funny because like I get a lot of resistance sometimes, especially if you're not used to doing this, or it's not the final look that you want, right? It's not the it's not the end result that you're really going for. You're like, I want loose, I want juice. You know what I mean? I want this beautiful smudgy painting. You know what I mean? And you know, and I tell them, it's like, start this way. You know, try this way first, and then we'll get into like, you know, what makes this cool, or what, you know, like how to make this better. And I don't want to say never do, but they because they're resistant on it, they're fighting it, and then they never really like learn what the hell I'm talking about, you know. But the ones that like do really well, the ones like, especially my classes, are the ones that kind of just forego whatever it is that they know, and they just trust me. You know what I mean? Because it's less about a process and more about a mentality, right? Where it's like, you know, your understanding is different now, right? Your ability to problem solve your way out of things is actually a lot better. And yeah, it's a really like, I don't know, like fun dynamic to kind of see when like certain artists kind of like blossom, but others like that are super like against, like, I guess, working clean because they want to be gestural and loose, kind of like, I don't know, they have a lot harder of a time, what I've noticed.
I feel like it's taken me 3 years for what you've taught to actually click in my head.
It's weird, right? I don't know. There's something about it. Like, I think like I understand what they're saying. I understand what people mean whenever they're, I guess there's a, like, you know, like for example, there's people like Zach Retz that paint a certain way, right? And you know, there's like, I want to paint like that guy. I don't want to paint like Kenny. That guy's trash, you know, whatever, you know? And like, yeah, I mean, you know, do it, try it, but understand that, you know, this guy is really good. You know, he's extremely good at what he does, and there's a level of skill that he has, and there's an understanding that he has that you don't have. So when you try and do the color dynamic, the hue jitter, and all those things, you know, you're missing the fundamental ideas that he knows, or he or she knows, right? And you're gonna mess that up, right? Just because you put a bunch of color on the page doesn't mean you're a Zach Retz, right? But it's like the understanding of like, oh, these are the fundamental ideas of image making. These are the core points of, you know, how an image actually works. Once you get that, you can do whatever you want, right? And it's funny because I had a friend, and he took like a mentorship with an artist. And I told him, I was like, oh yeah, he probably paints like this. And, you know, I got they don't like actively disagree with me. They don't just say, you're wrong. You know what I mean? But he then took a mentorship with this artist later. And then he was like, oh yeah, he paints just like you. And then he goes on afterwards and he just kind of messes some stuff up. I'm like, fucking there you go, dude. Like, but there's a lot of like non-belief in that beginning, and it's to be honest, it's a little frustrating. It's because you have to like defend it. I'm like, just trust me, man. Just I got you. Don't worry. But yeah.
So basically, you are saying they have skill issues.
I'll say like that, but you know what I mean. Like, something that I learned early on, whenever I took a class, right? I really, really try to just absorb whatever they're saying, you know, because like for those of you that like, and this is a problem with intermediate level students, beginner level students, not so much. They know they're not good, or they know they're missing something. So they don't say anything. They just say, like, oh, cool. You know, like, yeah, learn that. Cause they probably never seen it before, most likely. Right. But intermediate level students, intermediate and advanced, they kind of know some things, but they don't realize how much they don't know, right? There's like a level of like, they're finally able to kind of make what they want to make, but then there's this whole, you know, part afterward that they're missing, especially like production experience, especially that one core idea of somebody is going to be making you do this shit when you don't want to do it. You know, that's when you really need to figure out like, okay, why is Kenny doing things the way that sounds so... It sounds like it takes forever. It really does, right? It's like, oh, why you have 50 layers? Just paint on one layer, you know what I mean? Or it's looser, it's juicier, you know. But it's the intermediate level students that I get the most issue from. Not always, but you know, usually because they learned something from somebody and they like where they're going with it. But the issue is oftentimes they're missing the rest of that that process, right? Because usually they're really good at one part, right? And we've seen this before where, you know, you do a thumbnail, right? Very similar to like kind of what we were doing before, right? Where here, let me show you right now. Show all windows. You know, you're doing grayscale paintings like this, and you're like, why can't I do it on one layer? It's so slow to paint like this, right? Because in the beginning, it's always like, oh, why are you separating so many layers? I just do it in one. And then the whole idea is, oh, I have to take that to finish. Oh shit. So you're like sitting there, you're painting for days, weeks, months, years, right? And it just takes forever, you know, but when you see it all together and how streamlined it can actually be, you can kind of see why certain people paint a certain way, you know? But I think that's like one of the bigger things that's just missing, where it's just context. You know, I don't paint this way because I want to be the most, the cleanest or the best illustrator in the world. I paint this way because production makes me do this. They're like, you know, I want changes. I'm like, cool, man, I'll do whatever change you want, you know, without having like, you know, because they're gonna, dude, I shit you not, they're gonna be like, oh, we don't like these leaves. You know what I mean? They're gonna be like, you know that leaf in the back? Like, I don't like this shape that you did there. It's too close to his head. Or like, oh, change the scale on the back here, right? On that tree, because it's too thick, or the leaves are too big, or whatever, right? And then if you paint it on one layer, good fucking luck, right? You're gonna take all day to fix that one issue, and then I'm gonna go like this. I'm gonna delete it if it's too hard to fix, or I'm just gonna take it, scale it down, right? Fill out whatever I need to fill out, and then we go from there. And then I charge them for 8 hours. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I go sit there, I play with my cat, I do whatever the hell I want to do, and you know, it works, right? Because I'll you know, we'll make adjustments later. We'll the fun illustration part will happen, right? That's no issue. That's not the issue here, right? It's the clients always want changes. If you've ever worked with a client or anybody that is demanding a service for money, they want it their way, right? They always do, because I mean, they're paying for it, right? Why wouldn't they, right? It just makes sense why they would want to do that. But right, if you're not dynamic enough in your process, right? If you're somebody, let's say, even with 3D, for example, they're like, oh, hey, I did this whole 3D scene for you. Great. Hey, can we change that sky in the back? Well, it's all rendered. So I'm gonna have to remodel all that. It's like, well, okay, good luck. You know what I mean? It's like, versus like, you know, if you're good and you're I guess disciplined in your process, it does a lot. So cool, sick. We're moving, right? Colors, baby, let's go. What else do we got here? What else do I need? Some grass? Does I need grass? Is grass a thing? I guess I do. So let's see here. What I like to do, right? Especially in a phase like this, where I have like a scene, which is, you know, a scene. What I like to do is I try to keep things as, I don't want to say non-committal, but as flexible as possible. So there's things where like I need to put in grass and stuff, but I just need to fake in silhouettes, because at this point I still haven't been approved yet, right? Because, you know, let's say I was going from these roughs here, right, into this here. My art director hasn't seen it yet, you know, assuming this is like the first work session, right? And so I will always try to be as non-committal as possible up until they say, good, go. You know what I mean? Other than say, like, okay, sweet, wrap it up. And then I'll just do all the changes that I need, and then I'll just kind of go from there, right? So now I just need to put in some grass. I have grass brushes, dude, right? Easy, bro, let's go. Hold up, where's my grass? There, dude, look at that. Freaking sick, dog. Hold up. Dude, look at that grass. And like, because, and pro tip for everybody, if you are trying to get the most bang for your buck in terms of completion, right? Because for those that have like worked or like kind of like know, right? There's always this like level, like, you know, or for everybody, right? There's always that question of like, how do I know when something's finished, right? How do I know like when to stop, essentially, right? That's always a big question. And usually my answer is, well, when the client tells you to stop, that's when you're done, right? That's really the answer. When they say you're done, right? But the way you can get there quicker, right, is if you work on just your silhouettes, right? So right now, all I'm doing is like the grass is still the same, kind of tone that I'm working with here. Now I'm just making this grass taller. I'm just breaking the silhouettes of some of these shapes here to make it feel like there's grass, right? Because now you're like, oh, okay, I get what that is, right? I don't need to know every single, I guess, detail when it comes to the textures and some of the, the color movements and stuff like that. I just need these silhouettes to kind of pop, because once you get that, you're going to be a lot better off, right? Because now all I have to do is just kind of paint some things on the inside and we're, basically there, right? But right now it's, we're just putting blades of grass and it starts looking like grass. You're really not that far off. So little things like this really do go a long way. Whenever you're working, really try to maximize, what you're actually putting your priority on. Because if you saw earlier from my grayscale thumbnail to what I have now, right? All I did was just adjust silhouettes. I have a little bit of like shadow detail in that main tree section, but that was expected. That's what we were supposed to be doing, right?
It's taken me. This is one of the things that took 3 years to click. Not on grass, but like I remember you doing demos of your Mega Man lava world before, and how you did like lava with just little pebble shapes.
Yeah.
But like learning to see textures and detail as silhouettes has taken some time, but now that it has clicked, it's like, dang, why would you work any other way? Why would you draw that? That's just a few shapes.
Yeah, right. Like especially in production, right? I think something that especially like students and stuff when they first start, right? There's always this tendency to want to paint textures. When do you get to the textures? When do you, how do you start rendering this thing, right? Even I don't. So I don't want to call you out, G, but you did ask me about textures earlier, right? That's what I mean, right? It's always how do I get to the texture part faster, right? And to be honest, it's not about texture, right? It doesn't really do that much, right? Because at this point, you could probably turn in this color key and in some instances be okay, right? I'm not saying it always work, but depending on what your production's like more comfortable with, you'd probably be okay, to be honest. And that's really all it's about, right? I'm just kind of, because they just need to know roughly what color everything is. They don't need to know every single detail. There's look dev for that. There's texture artists for that. There's even like viz dev callouts of like this grass and all this stuff. And then they're going to build it in CG anyway. So why even do half of it? You just need to get the major tones. And that's what I'm doing here, right? There's some artistic things that I'm doing to kind of spice that up and make it look cool. But at the end of the day, right, textures almost never matter in a concept art workflow. Not that they don't matter, but there's a level of, it's not the first issue that you need to address, right? Same reason why like whenever we think about making strong paintings, it's like, oh, it's my rendering needs to get better. It's like, no, usually it's your graphic read. Usually it's your composition that does a lot of the heavy lifting, which is what I'm doing here, right? It's just composition, graphic read, and a little bit of color, right? And that color, I didn't even make myself. I color picked it, and I'm just not messing it up, right? And that's it. So sick.
Bro, do you even know how to art?
I don't. I'm not. It's funny too. Like I'm not the most artistic kind of person when it comes to a lot of this stuff. I think like a big misconception that I feel like I have to like kind of break a lot, not break, but like reform in a lot of artists' mind whenever we start, is that artists vary in their artistic, I guess, or not vary in their artistry, but different jobs require different levels of artistry, right? If you are an illustrator, like someone like, I don't know,
Ming Chen Shen.
Yeah, right. Like there's a level of, or even people like super like illustrate, like they purely do illustration, right?
Amy John.
Yeah, like there's a level of painting that they have to do, right? Because you have to get your textures right, the indications looking good, all the juicy details. That's a whole different job. But people confuse what we do as concept artists as illustration, right? It's like, oh, you need to be the best, painter there is. You really don't. It's not really that important to be able to paint extremely well. There is a level you need to hit, but you don't need to be at some of those levels, right? Like Jamie Jones, Craig Mullins, they're at like way past what the level that you actually need to be at, right? A junior level artist is the highest illustration level you generally need to be at, right? Like just to communicate what the hell you're trying to say. Obviously, better jobs will come at you, right? If you paint better, obviously. But there is a level of it doesn't really matter how well you can paint or how juicy some of your brushstrokes are, because that's not your job, right? There's a lot of there's a lot of other jobs that are there to, make up for that, right? Because the end product of what we're doing isn't the thing that you see on screen, right? Because if I did this color key for a movie, right, you would never see this specific painting. You see the information that this painting gave. I just set the colors for that scene, and then they model it, they VFX it, they light composite, the whole 9 yards, right? But that's somebody else's job. That's not mine. And so we kind of get confused oftentimes where it's like, oh, I need to, be really good at rendering, or I need to really have high quality. And it's like, I mean, sometimes you do, but it's a lot more rare than you might think. Being able to draw effectively, communicate ideas is the whole game, I'll read some of these comments. Let's see. Ian says, I've had a belief that working fast and frantically is a byproduct of watching time-lapse. Dude, yeah, watching time-lapse tutorials. Yes. So for those, I guess that started maybe even now, but I think it was really like prominent during, like, let's say the early 2010s, late 2000s, right? There was a lot of speed painting tutorials, right? There was people painting, photo bashing sometimes, but painting really quickly. And even worse, because it's fast forwarded, because it's speed painting, but it still took an hour. So they shortened it to like a minute, 5 minutes, whatever. So the hand's moving quicker than usual. And when you first see that as an artist, right, it's it's fast forwarded, but you don't know the degree to which it is fast forwarded, right? You don't know actually how fast they're really moving. And so, you get these videos of people going like, just the brush is moving and things are going, and you're not moving that fast because, you're aware that it's fast forwarded, but you are moving faster than you should be. And that's a big issue. Like, I think a lot of times you hear, like, I've heard this complaint a lot, not complaint, I guess, critique, I don't know. But where, like, when you watch Craig Mullins paint, it's dry, to say the least, right? Like, because I've seen Craig Mullins paint, it's just kind of, he's doing sits, looks at it, does his thing. He's like, kind of adds a little bit more. And it's like really slow. Like, the way I paint now is probably moving faster than the way he is, right? But I mean, he's, Craig mother effing Mullins, right? There's nothing, you know what I mean? And so there's a lot of like this idea of, you have to kind of move that quickly to be effective, right? In which you really don't, and the speed comes from your ability to know what you're doing, right? Because for me, whenever I'm painting, generally speaking, not always, but most of the time, whenever I'm painting, I'm not really guessing as to what I'm doing. Like if I'm having a full conversation with you, right? Like kind of what I'm doing now, right? I'm probably not 100% focused on this painting, right? For like, if you can't tell that, right? I'm a little distracted whenever I am painting live, right? Because I'm having a full conversation. But the fact that I'm able to really shows how little I'm actually how little I actually need to think about some of these steps, right? For those that are like just starting or kind of doing their thing, like if you've ever like had someone talk to you while you're painting, you literally have to stop. You're like, I can't focus when someone's saying something. A lot of artists will like leave the room or like they'll go to a quiet place to work because it's just too much. They just can't focus with somebody talking to them, right? And it's hard. It really is. And you're not supposed to be good at that. That's not a goal. Don't do that. But it is something where I do this so much to where I'm not really guessing. I don't ask myself, oh, what layer style is going to work better, or what layer should this be on, or anything like that. I just know it. You know what I mean? I just know it because I do it. And that speed comes from that execution. I'm not moving my hand faster. I'm making decisions faster. And that's kind of what everybody should understand about people that paint quicker. It's not physical speed, it's the mental speed, right? And that's how you get to like faster conclusions, right? Because it's just like whenever we're giving crits, for those that are like taking classes with an artist that like a professional artist, right? You'll kind of give them a painting and you're like, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing here, and they'll look at it within like 10 seconds. They're like, oh yeah, just fix that, and then it does everything. It fixes the whole thing. And they'll even do a paint overview half the time, right? And because of that, it's like, wait, how the hell, like, how they even see that? You've been looking at it for like, however long, you've never even noticed that, right? It's just because they've run into that problem 50, 60 times already. It's not something new. If I ever have an issue where I'm painting this and I'm like, oh, it's not reading or something, I just go through my checklist of like, oh, just check that, and that. And then hopefully that problem's within there somewhere, right? Ian says this programs the viewer. Oh yeah, the other part of that. This programs the viewer to think that those creative decisions happen instantaneously as opposed to working out the design problem. Yeah, it's a lot of like, you have to run into those problems. Like I was saying, it's a lot of there's solutions to problems, and it takes a long time to learn that. And that's like a lot of like whenever you're a junior art, not you, but other people, whenever you're like, when I'm communicating with junior artists and stuff like that, it's a lot of like, they've never seen this problem before. But when you actually like talk to a senior level artist, right? For whatever reason, they always have a strong answer. And it's usually like, oh yeah, back on, Transformers, we did this, or back at Blue Eye Samurai, we did this thing. And you're like, oh yeah, that's the answer. You know what I mean? It's actually really, it's just a lot of experience that really kind of gets you there, but you have to run into the problems. You have to know these problems exist and kind of like, work your way to get to that understanding, Cool. All right, let's see here. I think we're pretty close. Look at that, dude. And this is like the base color pass that I would do, right? This is something where we are, I don't know, like 80% of where this color key would go, right? Obviously I'm gonna make this better. I'm gonna spice this up, make it juicy. But at the end of the day, right, like we're not really that far away from what the color needs to be. And it's actually very easy. And I've actually been here for like the last, I don't know, like probably hour. I think I got there at like 8 o'clock, right? If we like, dial that back, and you can like see that once I kind of dropped in those colors and made those quicker adjustments. What is happening here? Why is this on G? Classic gradient, normal, reverse, thither, perceptual. Why is that darkening? What is it? Let's see. Hold up. 1 second. Photoshop being Photoshop. Classic gradient. Okay. Normal mode. Sweet. Normal. Why is that darkening though? It's on white. That's weird. You guys see that, right? I'm not crazy. The color is white.
Is that layer inverted?
I don't think so. It's a new layer. Yeah, that's weird. Why is it doing that? All right. When in doubt. I'll close that. I don't need that anymore. Close that out. All right, let's see. Let's see what happens. Quit. I didn't lose anything. I don't think I did, but shit, who knows? All right, let's try it again. Right? What the hell is that? Classic gradient. Okay, let's go to normal gradient. How's it? No, that's not doing it either. Classic gradient. It's not in reverse. Okay, we're in black right now. Basics. Should be that one. What the? Anyway. So, go back to soft light. Let's go to here. There you go. Much better. My God. So, at this point, right, I'm going to start kind of adding some like color tones and various things like that to kind of, you know, spice this up a little bit and make it, you know, just a tad bit better. Maybe incorporate a little more blues, maybe overall lighten this thing. But, you know, we're kind of getting to this stage to where this color key is not that far off from what it needs to be. I just need some, like, obviously there's some rendering that I'm going to do. We'll talk about that next week. But right now it's all shape. It's the same shapes that we had in the previous section, right? Like, we're not that far off from what we had here. I just, you know, took it a little bit further and, you know, here we go, right? So hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to kind of keep going for a second here, but it's hopefully it's pretty, it makes sense as to how I got here. I like soft light better. Sick. All right, let's get some, I need some more atmosphere. So something I want to do, where's James Bond at? Here it is. All right. So I want that like kind of foggier kind of look in that background. Right now it's really crisp because, you know, shapes. But I'm going to find that layer, find out where it needs to be. Probably something, probably do it behind this layer, see what happens. There it is. Let's grab that. Let's grab that color actually. G unit. Dude. Let's go. Easy peasy. Then this is kind of where like I'm just messing with stuff, right? I'm gonna start grouping some things just so I don't get so lost. Right tree. Get some of that. Good old cloud brush does the business. Boom. You're like, bro, atmosphere. Mask that out, airbrush. Easy, dude. If you're not using cloud brushes, you're messing up. Cloud brushes is the business. Oh, yeah, I had a bunch of topics I want to talk about today, but luckily we have had a lot of things to talk about. But yeah, I guess I guess I'll save those for next week.
Did you watch that Kevin Smith talk? Okay.
I did, dude. That was, I mean, that's it, man. That's a lot of the that's a lot of, you know, the decision making. For those that don't know, there's this Kevin Smith talk where he was like writing for Superman. Ultimately, the one that becomes the Tim Burton one or whatever.
Yeah.
And you know, he's talking about his experience on there, and basically the producer was making like a lot of like weird decisions based off of, you know, who God knows what. And it's just a lot of like, just, you know, people like putting in random things. Like if you watch movies and you're like, why the hell was that there? It's usually because somebody wanted it there. Someone's like, you know, and it's funny because that's it. That's the story. That's a lot of the decisions where it's like, I would do like, you know, art for clients and stuff like that. And then, you know, you always get the, oh yeah, this, you know, Bob wants this thing in there. You're like, what? Why? That's dumb. You know what I mean? That's like, that doesn't make any sense. And they're like, yes, whatever. You just do it. You know what I mean? Like, I was working at a game studio before, and we would like have this whole thing planned and like all these things, and then all of a sudden we go to pitch some things or we do whatever, and then like one of the producers or even the person himself or herself would come in and be like, I think we should have more of this. And then, you know, whoever's in charge, whoever's leading the team or whatever, be like, oh, what was that about? I don't know. Just felt it, you know, and they do that like, I don't know, like wise, enlightened CEO kind of game where they're like, I just know things. My vision is perfect. And yeah, you know, it's a lot of that. And that's, you know, that's the reality of it. It's this, you know, if it's not your money, they you might not get as much choice as you might think, you know.
It's kind of mind blowing how disconnected people up top are from good choices.
Yeah.
It seems like.
Yeah, because that's the thing, right? There's no prerequisite to create your own movie, right? Like for us as artists, there's prerequisites for us. You have to be good at art, you have to be good at design, you have to know somebody, or you have to do whatever, right? There's a whole litany of things that you're told that you need to do. But if you want to make a movie, all you got to have is money. And unfortunately, money doesn't always go to the most qualified people, right? We know this. We're aware of that reality, right? Not everybody with money is qualified to have money. You know what I'm saying? But they do. And that's what it is, you know, unfortunately. That's the game we play. And I think something to really, really take to heart is understand that concept, right? Because there's times where I'll be interacting with artists and stuff, and they'll get so mad. They'll get so like disappointed about like, dude, I had this great idea and then this person shot it down, or this person like just didn't take it or whatever. And it's like, yeah, man, that's what happens. And they went with their stupid idea. I'm like, yeah, man, it's because it's their money, you know. Like, of course they went with their stupid idea because they're the one paying for it. You know what I mean? Like, they're not going to go with your stupid idea. They're going to go with their stupid idea, you know. And not that your idea is stupid, but you know, it's a lot of that, and you have to be okay with that, you know. And I think like it's funny because I've gotten this this comment a lot where they're like, oh, Kenny, yeah, dude, it was great work with you, man. You know, it's like, because whenever we give you a task, you just say, yeah, sure. You know, just say, yep. Because yeah, when someone gives me a task, I don't care what it is. If you give me a task, I will handle it, right? To some degree, like if I can, within my power, right? If they're like, hey, do some emojis, great. You know, with love and care, I will execute these emojis, right? Like all these different tasks, like I don't give a shit what I'm painting, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not my job to combat them on this. They're paying me to do a service, and I'm gonna do that service, right? But artists don't feel that way oftentimes because it's personal. It's like, oh, I want to contribute to this project because it's my dream to do these things. And yeah, absolutely, you know, people do that stuff, right? But just realize that at the end of the day, it's not your money. It's not your product. You know, you can input as much as you want. That's necessary. Some, you know, most people would say, but just, you know, realize that if it's not your money, then you don't really get much say in how it ends up. You know, you can contribute, you can say things, but that doesn't mean they need to take it. And I think that's something that, you know, a lot of younger artists really need to understand. It's, oh, I want to work on the next Star Wars, you know, and then they like get a director that's doesn't have the same vision that they do, or you know what I mean? They're like, oh, but Luke would never do that. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, I mean, you know, you put in $100 million, and then, you know, maybe you'll make a call, you know. So I won't say it like that, but you know, that's the reality of our industry.
They asked me in the EA interview, do you play any sports? Like, do you care about it? Is it gonna bother you if you don't or do know? And listen, I can learn whatever you need me to learn. The process is the same. I can back it up, and if it's a jersey or if it's an elf, you know, so I will enjoy it just the same.
Yeah, it's like, you know, it's like, because at the end of the day, it's always like, they're like, oh, are you gonna, like, do you enjoy painting sports? Like, no, but I enjoy getting paid. You know, and that's what you're doing. So we're good, bro. You know, and you know, it's funny because like every time you go to these interviews, you have to like make up this bullshit of like, oh yeah, you know, because you guys are like the top game place and cutting edge, and I really want to work here and this and that. But in reality, it's like, yeah, because you're paying money and I need money, right? Like, you know, you have cash, I need cash, so I'm going to be here. And I think that's why I find like a lot of interview questions so dumb, because it's like, we know why I'm here, man. Like, let's be real. You know, we know exactly why this person is applying for this job, right? Like, let's not act like, you know, like there's some ulterior motive here, right? It's just who can lie about it the best, who can say it without getting caught, essentially, you know. And there's some places that, you know, they'll like there's things that you want to work on, absolutely, right? That, I mean, there's dream jobs for sure, but at the end of the day, it's a job, right? And I think people really have to understand that. It's just, you know, a lot of these questions of like, you know, what can we offer you? Cash, you know, straight into like direct deposit. You know what I mean? That's what you can offer me, and I'll do an amazing job. You know, we want people motivated. I mean, motivate me with cash, you know? And it sounds gross. It sounds dumb, but I mean, that's what it is. You know, I mean, I'm not going to put up with, you know, a slave driver boss and, you know, shitty work conditions because I like to paint for Star Wars. You know what I mean? No, just if you pay me, I'll be here, you know? But I don't know. I think that gets lost oftentimes. It's always like, oh, wow. Like, I don't know. I think when we first start, and it sounds very jaded, and I guess, you know, probably does or whatever, but there's a lot of like these aspirations like from artists of like, hey, I want to work at a place because of A, B, and C reason, you know, when in reality, like, you know, I think you kind of set yourself up for a lot of disappointment in that case, right? Where it's like, oh, you know, I got to work, I want to work here, I want to work at this place, I want to do this thing. And then in reality, for those that are lucky enough to actually work at a place like that, we're like, oh, I want to work at Disney, and then you actually end up at Disney or Riot or wherever, right? Like, there's this, it can be very draining, right? Because once you actually get to the place, you kind of learn how it works. And if you're not a lead, if you're not somebody in a decision-making process, it's really just a matter of time until you're disappointed. You know, it really is. And I think like, if you're like picky as an artist, you know, it's not a good combo, because, you know, if you're not in that position to be picky, right? It's, I mean, what's gonna, you know what I mean? What are you gonna do? It's not your project. You're not the one that put $100 million on the table or whatever it is, to make this thing. So it's going to be whatever stupid idea that guy has, or whoever paid for it has, right? Cause that's our job. Right. So. Yeah, dude, there's so many times where I'll look a dumb idea in the face and be like, wow, genius. Cause they'll be like, yeah, we had this really cool idea. And then like, I'm like, yeah, dude, that's the most original idea I've ever heard. Cause it's like, just pay me, man. I'll do whatever you want me to do. You know, you want that stupid idea in high definition, extremely well illustrated, dude, I will do that, you know?
If you get a particularly challenging idea, like it's so stupid that it's kind of hard to implement well, do you still get a lot of back and forths, or do you try to get it, you know, nail it on the first try, or is it just kind of one of those things, or it's difficult to nail, so you kind of go back and forth?
I think it's the thing where you really do have to kind of, I guess, adopt the idea that there's no such thing as a dumb idea, right? Not no such thing, right? There's plenty of dumb ideas, but there's potential in a lot of ideas, because, you know, there's times where it's like, yeah, that sounds idiotic, right? But then when you actually like put a strong designer on it, you know, somebody that actually knows what they're doing, generally speaking, it's probably going to end up being a good idea. You know, it's just, it might sound not interesting or not good in the beginning, but it just takes a second. It takes enough influences. It takes enough something, right? A lot of ideas start off that way, you know, because I'll, you know, whenever I work generally speaking, right? I'm in the front end of whatever production I'm doing, right? Normally, most of the time. And so when that happens, right, they're gonna give you ideas. Half of them don't work, but it's your job to actually make it work, right? Because you're only really ever 1 or 2 references away from making that look really cool, right? And because cool is subjective, right? It's cool is, you know, it really comes down to what's the context, because some things just inherently aren't cool, but when you mix it with something else, like, oh wow, that's actually pretty dope. You know, I really like the way that turned out, or so on and so forth, right? And so whenever you're designing, I really try not to think that like, oh, that's an unsavable idea. You know, it's really only unsavable if you don't give it the effort. There are some things where you might have to change proportions on certain ideas, right? But that's the whole goal, because in the beginning, when I first started, right, I found that oftentimes I would interact, let's say with a higher up, somebody that I kind of, let's say is not an artist, or maybe not like a trained designer like we are, for example, right? And so I will get these weird prompts. It's just like what are you smoking, right? That's like, and they see something in it, I don't know, whatever it is, right? And it's really not a strong setup, because they want like, oh yeah, it's like mostly this, and it's like kind of this or whatever, you know, it's like Teletubbies meets, you know, whatever, right? And I'm like, okay, you know, I've never gotten that prompt, just so everybody knows, but you know, it's it's a lot of like these weird ideas, and what you have to do is change the proportions to which that idea comes in. There's always something that you can grab, right? You know, I was designing an axe for mouse guard, right? I don't know if it would have went through, who knows, right? But I was talking to my coworkers because they were designing first, and then they were designing axes and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, what's a formula which you can add into this, right? Because it's a bunch of mice. So I was like, oh, cheese, you know, the comically stereotype of mice like cheese. I'm like, oh, what if we added cheese into this mix? And you know, they were like laughing. They're like, that's dumb, dude. What are you talking about? That's stupid. You know what I mean? But I was watching a lot of blacksmithing videos at the time, and there's this technique where they kind of like they dent the metal, so it's like this metal that's like just kind of like scooped in, right? And it looks like cheese, right? Surprise. And it's funny because, you know, the axe that we designed from that looked freaking dope, right? But then that form language came from something pretty dumb, to be honest, right? It wasn't exactly the most, I guess obvious thing, but when you actually put it to the test and you actually implement it correctly, right, it can be pretty cool. You know, maybe it's not something that they inherently see right off the bat, but it is something that they pick up on, or there's a meaning there that actually says something, right? And so whenever you get these prompts from clients, they'll usually say it's like, oh, it's this plus that, right? But they don't tell you the proportions. And you remember how we talked about in like design classes where they go, oh yeah, I want 70% of this, 20% of that, 10% of that. And you kind of change those proportions, right? All you have to do is just change those proportions. The dumb thing that you're like really not falling in love with, 5%, you know, 1%. But as long as they can still kind of see that you did try, that's all that matters, you know? But you want to give them the one that they're asking for. It's like, you know, 50% of that dumb idea, right? It's like, you know, it's the big proportion. You still want to give that to them, but you as the designer show up and you're like, here's the better one. Here's what I would think. Here's how we apply this. And that's how you kind of get better pitch work, right? Where you're like actually designing something from scratch that somebody actually enjoys, because a lot of that, you know, it really comes down to like how you implement these things. They're you know, if you follow the client directly, right? In my experience, it usually leads to failure. Not failure, but it's really hard to do exactly what they tell you and make it look good, because they don't actually know how to make things look good. So I guess there's an inherent flaw there, right? But you as the designer need to kind of, you know, wiggle your way out of that, where it's like, I did what you told me, but here's the cooler thing that I think we should do. And as long as you gave them what they asked for, they don't mind the extra thing. It's kind of like if you go to a restaurant and they're like, you're like, hey, I want a steak. And they're like, hey, here's fish instead. And you're like, but I asked for a steak, you know? But if you say, hey, here's the steak that you asked for, but this is actually what we're the best at, they usually won't complain. They'll either go, oh, that's great, I'll take the steak, right? Or they'll go, that looks really good, let's go that way instead, right? But they don't feel ripped off. They don't feel like you disobeyed them. You know, you're giving them options, right? It's just a psychology game of like, how do you get the client to, you know, get like kind of, you know, how do you work with them? It's a human interaction, you know? So
Yeah, that makes sense.
cool. Okay, let's see. So we are over time, but I did want to kind of do some things real quick. As you can tell, right? Like a lot of this, I mean, this was done an hour ago. I don't say an hour ago, but it was done a while back. It wasn't like, it's not like this is something where, you know, you couldn't tell from the second I finished. Like, I think when I said that, oh, I'm turning this tree gray instead of brown, it was basically there, right? But hopefully this is something that makes sense. Like, you know, we're just trying to make a scene that, you know, looks like another scene, right? Where's the keyframe at? Boom, right? And, you know, maybe it could be a little bit better. Who knows? But the whole point is, you know, we're roughly in the same ballpark, right? So now I can set this up and do this for the rest of my color keys, right? So looking back at this again, let's do a quick review as to kind of where we went and how we went about it, right? So I have a bunch of value paintings here. And in reality, right, for everybody, this stream, the way we're going about this isn't how I normally do it. I don't really work in grayscale and then into color. I will usually just go straight to color and check my values as I go, right? But this is just a way for people that are like newer and just starting to pick things up. This is how we kind of understand it. So I want you to think about this as we're going into color, right? So there's a transition of story points, right? It goes from light to a little bit darker, and then the goal point of pure light, or not light, but brighter. And then there's a realization that we're in danger. So we go to immediate darkness. There's this loud and then quiet, right? And that's really what I was aiming for there. You know, she's red in these scenes, Little Red Riding Hood, right? Surrounded by a sea of green. She's not where she belongs. She's somewhere that is the opposite of her, somewhere that she should not be, right? And so we're trying to show that danger, not through the color, or not just through the color, but the values, the shapes, all of that. And then from there, you know, finding color reference from movies, right? And they're all random movies, right? And just trying to get that color transition correct, right? From warm colors, warm matching the red, just a little bit more, still green, but warm. So she feels a little more welcome there, right? Versus going to the colder, darker, more mysterious kind of areas, right? And ultimately transitioning to this kind of darker, kind of bluish kind of tone, right? And there's this color transition. The whole point of color keys isn't to show every single moment, it's to show when moments change, right? Because within every single one of these steps, there's a whole scene of things happening where it's like, oh, the character's talking to the wolf, the character's walking through the thing, doing whatever. And but it's all going to be the same kind of color palette. So you're in that same kind of zone, but every piece makes sense with the rest, right? So hopefully that makes sense. And then from there, you know, just color picking. Don't be a hero, right? Don't be the person that's like, I'm gonna do this by hand. Just why? It's a waste of time. Just color pick, because no one owns color palettes, right? You can use the colors, right? You're fine. Just don't cut Daniel Craig out and put it into your painting. That it doesn't work that way. But you can color pick from the atmosphere, from the lighting, get it to, you know, roughly match, and then we can kind of start painting from there, right? So pretty easy, right? Hopefully this makes sense. There's a little bit of there's not a lot of technique involved here, right? It's a lot of thinking, and hopefully for the more advanced students out there, right, if you're listening to this and you're trying to apply this, is a lot of mentality switching, right? Understanding how things link together, having images that work together as a unit rather than individual pieces, right? Because when we start, we're always thinking about one painting. But when you get more advanced, we're thinking about the unit, the whole project, not just the one, right? So, but yeah, for those that are doing the homework, right? You know, this is kind of what I want you to apply for all of it. Do this for all 6. Obviously in the stream, I do it for 1, but you know, apply it to all of them. You don't have to get to a full render level. We're just kind of getting the base colors down and the atmosphere looking correct. And then, we'll adjust rendering next week. But, as you can tell, if you get your foreground shapes looking pretty solid and you get some of that kind of focal point really clean, you're 90% of the way there. From here, it's just like little texture things here and there, and then we'll be good to go, right? So hopefully that makes sense. And yeah, thanks for hanging out, everybody. So I guess for YouTube, I'll see you next week. And then yeah, so hold on, let me get my mouse to the other side. It won't work. Cool. So with that in mind, I'll see you next week.